Hello everybody and welcome to Safety Tavern's video on boom lifts. Now, we are not going to be covering scissor lifts and we're not going to cover anything that is mounted to a truck. So anything truck mounted. We're also not going to cover anything that's being pulled by a trailer. We're also not going to cover what I consider spider lifts. That's any of these track mounted that you drive up a stairwell or you drive out into some weird location. So anything on the screen right now, we're not going to cover, including this weird contraption over here. None of these lifts are we going to cover. We're just looking at boom lifts. This class is also not intended for anyone that's going to be operating in what I consider to be a negative lift situation. And I know that sounds weird, and yes, I just made that term up. What I call a negative lift is if you take the first knuckle of the boom, the first pivoting point of a boom lift, and draw a horizontal line out from it, anything that's operating below that line, I call that a negative lift. This bridge right here, in order to get down, they're going to have to use what I consider to be a negative lift, meaning we're going below the 0 degree of the horizon. Meaning we're going to have a crazy amount of force trying to flip that machine over. If you're going to operate a lift like this, this class is not appropriate for you. The competent person for your company can use this video in conjunction with other training, but you need a whole lot of additional training if you're going to be going into the negatives. Do not use a negative lift unless you've had additional training on that lift and specifically know exactly how far you can flip it over. And this is why. You see this bridge? You see this truck? When you go into the negative, you are dramatically offsetting the center of gravity for that vehicle, that lift, that whatever you're operating out of. That's why this class is not intended for negative lifts. So I know it's not a term that anyone else uses, but if you're using it in a negative lift situation, you need way more than this class. And just like I normally do, we stole somebody else's videos. Our first video comes to us from GENIE. It is a fantastic video. I chopped a lot of it off because it talked a lot about scissor lifts or other rules and regulations and so on and so forth. So if you're a competent person for your company or for your job site, you might want to go watch the original video. Also, if you like the video, go ahead and go to their website, their channel, give them thumbs up and comments and all that. They're the original creators of it. I'm just stealing it like we always do.
Complete information on the specific model that you plan to operate can be found in the operator's manual that is always stored on the machine. Always read and follow the appropriate operator's manual for the aerial platform you are learning to operate. Should you have any questions or find you don't fully understand any subject covered in this presentation, please discuss them with your trainer. MEWP is an acronym for Mobile Elevating Work Platforms. MEWP classifications are made up of a combination of two key distinguishing descriptions: a MEWP group, which is determined by where the platform location is in reference to the tipping line, and a MEWP type, which is in reference to traveling. There are two groups of MEWPs, Group A and Group B. A Group A machine has a design that does not allow the main platform to extend beyond the tipping line. In other words, the platform does not go outside of the drive chassis envelope. A perfect example of a Group A machine would be a scissor lift. Conversely, a Group B machine has a design that allows the platform to extend beyond the tipping line. A great example of a Group B machine would be an articulating or telescopic boom. In addition, there are three types of MEWPs, types 1, 2, and 3. With a type 1 MEWP, traveling is allowed only with the machine in its stowed position. In a type 2 MEWP, traveling with the work platform in the elevated position is controlled from a point on the chassis. And finally, with a type 3 MEWP, traveling with the work platform in the elevated travel position is controlled from a point on the work platform. There are 6 classifications of MEWPs, and training is required for each classification. However, since type 2 MEWPs are relatively uncommon, this training program will focus only on type 1 and type 3 machines. Beginning with type 1 MEWPs, whereby traveling is allowed only with the MEWP in the stowed position, a great example of a type 1 Group A machine would be manually propelled vertical lifts. The platform never extends beyond the tipping line, and the machine is designed to only be moved with the platform in the stowed position. Type 1 Group A MEWPs are the least expensive and most basic personnel lifts. They are economical and easy to transport, and are often a good alternative to platform-controlled vertical lifts. They're compact. Most models can roll through single or double doorways. They can also go on some elevators depending on elevator load capacity. They're relatively lightweight, so they are ideal for use on floors that only support limited loads. Trailer-mounted booms are perfect examples of a Type 1 Group B machine. The platform is designed to extend beyond the tipping line, and the machine is designed to only be moved with the platform in the stowed position. Stationary boom mobile elevating work platforms combine the up and over access of an articulating boom with the convenience of a built-in trailer. They provide an excellent working envelope with the ability to reach up and over obstacles, allowing workers to perform tasks faster and more efficiently than smaller, manually propelled products at a significantly lower cost than that of a self-propelled boom. Now, let's move on to Type 3 MEWPs, whereby traveling with the platform in the elevated position is controlled from a point on the platform. A great example of a Type 3 Group A machine would be electric or rough terrain scissor lifts. The main platform never extends beyond the tipping line, and machine travel is controlled from the platform controls. Platform-controlled vertical mobile elevating work platforms offer outstanding maneuverability and productivity-enhancing features. They are self-propelled, and most models have the ability to drive while fully elevated. Common platform-controlled MEWPs include scissor lifts and single personnel lifts. They offer either 0-degree or high-angle turning radius for outstanding maneuverability in tight or congested job sites, and some are lightweight enough to fit in an elevator depending on the elevator load capacity. Some models are relatively lightweight, so they are ideal for use on floors that only support limited loads. Articulated and telescopic booms are perfect examples of a Type 3 Group B MEWP. The platform is designed to extend beyond the tipping line, and machine travel is controlled from the platform controls. Articulating Z-booms are aerial platforms with multiple boom sections that hinge or articulate, allowing the operator to gain access to work areas over obstacles and barriers. Also referred to as knuckle booms or up and over booms, these versatile products are perfect for tight access in hard-to-reach areas or when reaching over obstacles. Telescopic S-booms are aerial platforms with boom sections that extend telescopically. They're also commonly known as stick booms because of their straight appearance. Telescopic booms offer greater horizontal outreach than any other type of mobile elevating work platform. Standards organizations worldwide are calling for clear training on who is responsible for what when operating mobile elevating work platforms, commonly referred to as MEWPs. In the United States, the standards are established by the American National Standards Institute, or ANSI. The recognized standard for mobile elevating work platforms is ANSI A92. ANSI A92 standards are enforced by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA. Per ANSI A92, the user must designate a qualified person to monitor, supervise, and evaluate operators on a regular basis to ensure their proficiency. Examples of situations when retraining would be necessary include, but are not limited to, expiration of the operator's valid training period as determined by the employer, deterioration of the operator's performance, the operator's extended period of time with no operation of a MEWP, the operator's introduction to new or significantly different MEWP technology, or the operator has been involved in an accident or near-miss incident with the MEWP. The owner of the aerial platform could be the dealer in a rental situation, or may have the responsibility of a user if they are directing operators to operate an aerial platform. It is the owner's responsibility to make sure that the manufacturer's operators and any other safety manuals are in good condition and stored on the machine. And, just like a dealer, the owner must properly maintain the machine to the manufacturer's specifications. The owner should always ensure that any personnel that they direct or authorize to use an aerial platform have received appropriate training and familiarization. The user, by definition, is the person or persons who are in the position of directing operators to use aerial platforms in their work. Most commonly, this is the employer. Like an owner, the user must provide appropriate training and familiarization and make sure that the operators and safety manuals supplied by the manufacturer are in good condition and stored on the machine. The user must develop a safe use program specific to MEWPs, which must include a site risk assessment and proper selection of a suitable MEWP, as well as a written rescue plan that ensures that all occupants in the platform receive training that explains procedures to follow if they fall and await rescue or witness another worker's fall. The user is responsible for only allowing trained, qualified, and authorized personnel to operate an aerial platform. The user is responsible for designating a qualified person to monitor, supervise, and evaluate operators on a regular basis to ensure that they have the skills necessary to do the job safely. The operator is the person who actually performs work using a MEWP. It is the operator's responsibility to check that the operators and safety manuals are stored on the machine and are always read and understood before operation. The operator is responsible for operating the aerial platform within the limits of intended use as defined by the manufacturer in the operator's manual and job site and government regulations. This includes avoiding hazardous situations, performing a visual pre-operation inspection, performing comprehensive function tests prior to use, performing a workplace inspection, and only using the machine as the manufacturer intended. The operator is responsible for reporting any problems or malfunctions that occur before or during operation. And finally, the operator must ensure that all occupants in the platform have a basic level of knowledge to work safely on the MEWP. In addition to these important standards, operators are subject to specific local, regional, and national workplace rules and regulations. So please, check with the appropriate safety organizations for specific information that would apply to you. Along with the operator's manual, a copy of the ANSI Manual of Responsibilities is included with every machine shipped in the United States and Canada. These manuals, and any other safety manuals provided by the manufacturer, are considered a permanent part of your machine and must remain with the machine at all times. Consult these manuals when you require specific information for your model of mobile elevating work platform. The machine must not be moved with the platform raised unless it is designed for this purpose. Pushing or pulling on objects outside of the platform. Placing ladders or scaffolds against the machine. Operating the equipment on unlevel or unstable ground conditions. Bad weather or windy conditions. Unsafe numbers of people or too much weight in the platform. To avoid falling, don't sit, stand, or climb on the platform guardrails. Be sure to always lower the platform entry mid-rail or close the gate before operating. To avoid collisions, you should be aware of how and where the machine is moving. You must first perform a workplace inspection and identify and avoid ground and overhead obstructions. These machines are not electrically insulated. That means there is no protection for the operator, bystanders, or machine from electrical shock as a result of contact or unsafe proximity to power lines or any other electrical charge. Safety information about required clearance from power lines and other electrically charged devices can be found in the operator's manual and on safety signs on the machine. The operation of any mobile elevating work platform is subject to certain hazards that can be protected against only by the exercise of intelligence, care, and common sense, and not by mechanical means. It is essential that operation, maintenance, and service of aerial platforms is performed only by competent, careful people trained in the intended use, safe operation, maintenance, and service of this type of equipment. Also, be reminded you will find additional hazards listed in the operator's manual. Always read and understand these before operating the machine. There are also more resources on the machine in the form of safety and instructional decals. The safety decals have the safety markings of danger, warning, and caution. The green or blue instructional decals indicate operation or maintenance information. Remember, if you don't follow all safety instructions and exercise safe operating procedures, serious injury or even death could occur. So please, always follow the instructions that the manufacturer has set out for both safety rules and operating instructions. There are 5 key concepts of safe machine operation, all of which you will find outlined in your operator's manual. They are: avoid hazardous situations, always perform a pre-operation inspection, always perform function tests prior to use, inspect the workplace, and only use the machine as it was intended. These principles, if followed in sequence, will help you to operate the mobile elevating work platform safely and efficiently. The first key concept for safe machine operation is knowing how to avoid hazardous situations. Proper training and common sense will help you to avoid hazardous situations associated with operating a MEWP. You must be able to recognize and avoid potential tip-over, fall, collision, and electrocution hazards, as well as any other hazards that may exist. It is critically important, before you even get near the work environment or the machine, to know what kind of hazards to be looking for. A second key concept for safe machine operation is the pre-operation inspection. This is important because very often you may not know if the machine has been damaged or modified or if it's been properly maintained. This visual inspection is designed to keep the operator out of harm's way by discovering if anything is apparently wrong with the machine before the operator performs the function tests. You're looking for things like modifications, damage, loose or missing parts, and hydraulic or other fluid leaks. Your operator's manual has a complete checklist of items you need to inspect. Let's look at a few examples that apply to MEWPs. Limit switches, platform condition, lift links, pins, and banjo bolts, swing bearing and rotator bolts, electrical components, hydraulic components, lift mechanism, battery condition, decals, and wheels and tires. If the machine checks out, you're ready to perform the function tests, our third key concept for safe machine operation. We do function tests to make sure that you can get up and down safely before you go into the work environment. We want to discover any damage, problems, or malfunctions before the machine is put into service. Of course, you have to get up in the air to do your work. But more importantly, if you have a health or safety issue and you need to get down or others need to bring you down, it is vital to verify that the machine is operating properly. Before you begin testing functions, select an area that is firm, level, and free of ground and overhead obstructions. Follow the function test sequence outlined in the operator's manual. If a machine fails a test, it must be removed from service, repaired, and re-inspected before it can be placed back into service. Let's take a look at a few examples of function tests that apply to MEWPs. Outrigger deployment, outrigger interlocks, emergency stop, tilt alarm, lift function, and pothole mechanism deployment. The complete list of function tests is located in your operator's manual. Our fourth key concept for safe machine operation is the workplace inspection. Earlier, we learned how to identify some of the hazards that can be encountered on a job site, such as tip over, fall, electrocution, and collision hazards. Now, as you move on to the work site, you can see what circumstances will contribute to hazardous situations. If these hazardous situations present themselves, remember, it's your responsibility as an operator to identify and avoid all hazards and report them to your employer so that they can be properly addressed. Keep your eyes open for drop-offs and holes, floor obstructions in hazardous locations, overhead obstructions, electrical conductors, wind and unsafe weather conditions. Other workplace hazards are listed in the Operators and Responsibilities manuals. There may be others, so always make sure that you have identified all potential hazards and know how to avoid them before moving the aerial platform into the workplace. It is also important to note that you, as an operator, have an obligation to inform the user or owner if a work environment contains even one thing that will prevent you from safely doing your job. The fifth key concept for safe machine operation is to only use the machine as it was intended. The operating instructions section in the operator's manual provides instructions for each aspect of mobile elevating work platform operation. It is the operator's responsibility to follow all the safety rules and instructions in the responsibilities and operators' manuals. MEWPs are designed to lift people and their tools to overhead work locations. The operator's manual will indicate if the MEWP can be used to lift materials. Using the machine for anything other than the activity specified in the operator's manual could result in death or serious injury. Only properly trained and authorized personnel should be permitted to operate a mobile elevating work platform. If more than one operator is expected to use the MEWP at different times in the same work shift, they must all be qualified operators and are expected to follow all safety rules and instructions in the Operators, Safety, and Responsibilities Manuals. That means every new operator should perform a pre-operation inspection, function test, and a workplace inspection prior to each work shift. Once you have successfully completed the participant's guide and the written test, you will almost be ready to operate a mobile elevating work platform. Read the operator's manual for the specific machine you wish to operate. Then you must operate the machine to demonstrate proficiency in front of a qualified person. Let's review the steps. First, read and understand your operator's manual. Be aware of hazards to look out for and avoid them. Perform a pre-operation inspection on the equipment. Perform function tests prior to use. Inspect the workplace for unsafe conditions and familiarization. And only use the machine as the manufacturer intended. We know you can succeed, but it's up to you. Thank you for paying attention, and be safe out there.
And our next video comes to us from Gearheads Equipment Sales. Excellent video. They show you the actual operation from the ground and from the basket. Very good video. If you like it, go give them a thumbs up, give them comments.
Hey guys, Gearheads Equipment here. We're going to take you through the safe operation of a GENIE S60 boom lift. Pretty much all the sizes of these GENIEs operate pretty similarly, so this should work on 40 footers, 80 footers, even if they're articulating. So we're going to start with the basket in the air. We come over here to the control panel. Start with putting the key in, and you're going to turn it to ground control. Pull your safety stop out and start her up. Now that we've got it started, I'm going to take you through all the controls down here. Anytime you're using one of these controls from the ground, you have to hold down this switch to make sure that it'll activate these controls. I can't do it all one-handed. It's kind of a two-handed process, which is kind of the point. So I'm just going to show you what you would do. This first one would bring the whole boom up and down. So push it up to go up, down to go down. Again, you have to be holding this down first and hold it down the whole time you're hitting this control. Now all these controls work the same way. This would boom out, so you'll push it that way, or pull it in to boom it in. This will rotate the entire boom, or what some people call the turret. This would be for a jib. This boom doesn't have a jib, so you can't do that. This one rotates the basket, and this one tilts the basket up and down. I'm going to bring this boom down to the ground and then take you into the basket to show you how to work it from there. As you can see, now we have the basket down to the ground. Now that it's on the ground, we want to get into the basket, but before we do that, we want to switch the controls over to the sky controls or basket controls. Sometimes if you turn this key quick enough, you'll be able to keep the machine on. We've got the machine still on. Safety stop switch is still out. You don't need to turn this off, just go into the basket. You'll just come over. Climb into the basket. When you're operating the machine from the basket, you're always going to want to have your foot on the pedal to do any of the functions. So whether you're driving the boom, you're booming out, or you're booming up and down, or turning the basket, you always want to have your foot on this pedal. The only time you don't is when you start it. If you have your foot on the pedal when you try to start it, it will not start. So keep your foot off the pedal, turn that to the, well, first of all, don't forget to pull your stop switch, and then you start the machine. Once you're to the point where you want to travel to a new location on a job site, you can use this to either go rabbit speed or turtle speed. It's the safest, obviously, to operate it in turtle. You just might go pretty slow. And if you're in rabbit, you have to basically be close enough to the ground in order to take advantage of the rabbit speed. Otherwise, the machine is not going to move quickly for you. If you're high enough, it'll move in turtle mode just to it's kind of a safety thing. Your horns over here, again, these are the basket controls. You can see the stickers. And then the main thing we always get questions on is people say the boom won't drive. So a lot of times if the basket is on the other side of the wheels, you can see this is the side of the machine the basket really should be on if you're driving it. But on a job site, you might spin it around, do a 180. And what you'll want to do, it's not going to want to let you drive because it's outside of the safety capacity to drive. You'll hold this switch down. This switch will allow you to drive. It's basically you're telling the machine, okay, I know that I'm out of the safety zone, but we need to drive it at this point. This knob here, if you look at the stickers, is going to steer the machine and drive it. So you pull it. You got to have your foot on the pedal. You pull it. The machine's going to roll towards you. Push it. It's going to roll backwards, and then do that. You'll see the tires steering. Now to boom up, again, put your foot on the pedal. Do this. As you can see, we're going up into the air. And then when you get to where you want to go up in the air, you can use this one to pull the boom out. So pretty simple, just make sure you pay attention to the controls and the stickers on the panel. It pretty much walks you through how to do it. And again, you'll see we're going back in now. And this boom will get you 60 feet up into the air. And finally, when you're done with the machine, bring it down to the ground. Make sure you always check what's beneath you. You don't want to smash somebody's head. You bring it down to the ground. Stop the machine, turn it off, and exit the basket.
Now, this next video comes to us from Oregon OSHA and Hoffman Construction, and granted, this is not boom lifts. This is actually fall protection. No, this is not a fall protection class, but this is one of the least talked about topics in fall protection, and that is fall protection trauma. You've had the fall, and now you have trauma afterwards. So this is a possible solution for preventing that.
And one of the things I do talk about is the straps that are on the side of a lot of harnesses over your hip area. If you do fall, you sit in that harness until somebody retrieves you. If you're in an area or somebody doesn't have a plan, doesn't know how to retrieve you, you could be sitting there for a while. It's going to take the fire department, if you're 200 feet off the ground, they have to be called, they have to arrive. You're going to wait there until they figure out how to reach you. You have minutes sitting in a harness while you're dangling there and all the pressures on the inside of your thighs on that femoral artery until you start to develop a clot. And so developing a clot there is going to depend on if you have a blood disease, how healthy you are, how much trauma you had when you fell. And so those straps right there are extremely important. I tell everybody that if you're going to be wearing a harness, you want those straps there. Because if you aren't deploying those straps and you understand how to deploy it, hook it together and stand in there, you're going to sit there and you're going to get a clot. Now, the clot isn't the problem. The problem is when you get taken out of that harness and that clot gets let go out of that femoral artery and where it travels to. Because if it travels to your lungs, it can cause a pulmonary embolism, or if it goes to your brain, it can cause a stroke, okay? And so it's extremely important. If people think just putting on a harness and tying off correctly is all they need to know, they're only halfway there. And falling in a harness is bad. Falling in a harness and having a stroke and having paralysis on the side of your body and losing your speech and changing your whole life, that's a big deal.
All right, so there's two main types of lifts that we're going to be talking about in this class, and that is this one on the right that you see, that's the regular boom lift, and then the one on the left, it's a narrow one-man lift or one-woman lift, whatever, I don't care. It's a one-person lift. Both of these are the two main types that we're going to be talking about, but first, there's a bunch of rules that apply to these. Obviously, you've got your own company's safety manual, and I don't know what's in it, so I can't train on that. The next one is your general contractor has a safety manual, and again, I don't know what's in there, so I can't train on that. The next one is your actual site, your facility, your location. Do they have any special rules? And then the state or the city or the county that you're in, do they have any rules? I can't train on any of these things that are above here because I just don't know where you're at. What we can talk about is OSHA. Big brother OSHA, we can do some training on that. After that, it's going to be ANSI, and then finally we're going to get into the actual boom lift, and we're going to do a basic little review of this one specific manual. That way you are familiar with how to read it and what's going on with it. So let's get it on, baby. OSHA has a fact sheet that's available to everyone. Just go onto a search engine, type in OSHA fact sheet aerial lifts, and you can find this. It makes an excellent handout, and we're going to go through this pretty quick, so if you need to, feel free to pause and read at your own leisure. This part just says boom lifts can be awesome, but they're also dangerous, so be careful what you're doing. All of these things can kill you or hurt you on a boom lift. These are all the major points that need to be hit during training, and this is when you need to do retraining. OSHA wants you to do this pre-start inspection, but also a work zone inspection. Yeah, this is like the second or third time you're hearing inspect the work area before you operate the lift. It's very important. Here are some things to remember with fall protection. Here are some things to remember while you're actually operating, whether you're driving it or you're maneuvering it. Overhead protection hazards that need to be taken into a consideration. And then the stability of the work zone. We're going to cover this a little bit later on, but this is a pretty good handout. And finally, at the end of it, it has the list of rules and regulations that apply as far as OSHA and ANSI go, the standards that need to be taken into consideration. The main reason I brought this up, but I didn't actually train on it, is because this is more of a something to keep around, and you haven't been on a boom lift in about a year. You can't remember everything, so double check and hit this. You've already had training, you're a competent operator, you know what you're doing, but you just want to refresh yourself. This is a fantastic resource for that. But keep in mind, this doesn't get updated. They're never going to change this. There may have been new standards, regulations that have come out that this doesn't capture. That's why it's a pretty good resource just to refresh, but it's not something I can train on. All right, let's take our Mighty Morphin Power list, and 1910.67 is first on the block. Wait a minute, Mr. Safety Tavern. I thought 1910 was for general industry. This is a construction-based channel. I agree with you, but a lot of times OSHA will actually reference back to 1910 quite often, but more importantly, you may have warehouses or other situations where you're going to have a boom lift that needs to be operated. Perfect example is, how are you going to change the light bulbs at the top of your warehouse? Now you got to create a whole new training program. No, we can just make it one big training class that covers all of it. So, 1910.67. This is pretty much definitions. What is an aerial device, aerial ladder, articulating boom platform, extensible boom platform, insulated aerial device, mobile unit, platform, vehicle, vertical tower, and then we get into general requirements. This is more about construction. This is about field modifications. Doesn't apply to firefighting equipment and anything near overhead electrical lines. Now you're talking about 1910.333 Charlie 3. Ladder trucks and tower trucks we're not talking about. Now this is extensible and articulating boom platforms, which is you. Lift control shall be tested each day prior to use. Only trained persons can operate. Belting off to an adjacent pole, structure, or equipment while working from an aerial lift shall not be permitted. You must stay tied off to the boom lift that you're in. Employees shall always stand firmly on the basket. Don't be climbing stuff. Keep your feet on the basket floor. You have to wear good fall protection. Don't exceed the loads of the basket or the boom. Brakes shall be set, and outriggers, when used, shall be positioned on pads or solid surfaces. Wheel chock shall be installed before using an aerial lift on an incline. Aerial lift truck, we're not talking about aerial lift trucks today, so this doesn't matter. Because it's going to carry a person, it also has to have a lower control, which all the boom lifts we're talking about do. Climbers shall not be worn while performing work from an aerial lift. I have no clue what climbers are, and I can't find a real definition for it, so wear your normal boots and safety vest and hard hat, whatever your normal gear is, plus fall protection, and that's it. Like, you shouldn't be wearing any crazy climbing crap while you're operating a boom lift, especially whatever OSHA's calling climbers. So figure it out, competent person, and you can tell your own people. Don't modify the lift. Before you're going to travel with the lift, make sure you inspect everything, especially the outriggers and the boom itself. This is for people that are doing tests on it, which nobody's being trained to work on it. This is a bursting safety factor for the manufacturers of the hydraulic components. Down here, this is welding on the actual scissor lift, not welding from it, but if you're welding on the scissor lift, which nobody here is being trained to be able to fix or repair a scissor lift, so this doesn't matter. And back to bursting safety factor for building it, welding standards, welding standard, welding standard, welding standard, welding standard, and then the end of the page. 1910-67 is done. Bring on 1910-269, Papa. Now, if anyone looks here, you'll see 1910 subpart R, also known as 1910-269, is all about electrical power generation, transmission, and distribution. So for most people in the construction industry, this doesn't really matter to you. This really isn't going to pertain to you at all. Even for electricians, the majority of this isn't really going to apply to you because the majority of construction work that we do is done with the power off, like before we even turn power on. The only exception to this is obviously going to be temporary power. That is power distribution. So when we're running temporary power, you may need to recheck this, double check this. But again, this is only boom lift with temporary power, which most of the time, we're not using a boom lift when we're installing temporary power. So again, it's a very niche section here. The main reason that we're going to run through this, and we're going to do it really fast, so feel free to use pause and play buttons on whatever device you're using. But the main reason we're going through this is because the OSHA fact sheet said that it was applicable. Visually inspect everything before each use. Technically, this is a motor vehicle, which means if you're going to operate it on a job site, it must have a reverse signal alarm that's really loud, or you got to have someone down there giving hand signs. None of this down here is talking about a boom lift, and this is talking about an electric line truck. This next section is talking about outriggers, and it says shall be operated with the outriggers extended. But here's the thing. There are some boom lifts that have outriggers, although most of them do not. If they have outriggers, check the manufacturer's manual and see when the manufacturer wants you to extend those outriggers. If you look at the manufacturer's manual, it will usually tell you when operating between 0 to 100 feet, you're good to go. You don't need to use them. But if you go at 110 and over, you need to use them. They'll give you a, when you're starting to reach this height, now you need to start using the outriggers. Check the manufacturer's recommendations, as well as talk to the competent person for your company on what they want you to do here. The operator of the machine needs to be able to see the outriggers. If for whatever reason the work area means that you can't put your legs down, the outriggers down, then you can't go to that extended height that the manufacturer has warned against. And what this means is you got to find another way. This boom lift is not going to work. You're going to have to do something else. Don't overload anything. Operation near energized lines or equipment, we are not covering at all. This is an additional class that you're going to need if you're going to be operating a boom lift near energized stuff. So if anything is energized, you need additional training. Competent personnel, you will need a mixture of this, as well as you might want to start looking at NFPA 70E, depending on where you're working and what applies, as well as any other codes or rules, regulations that apply to you. And the next page, this part again is still working near energized lines. And then we move into 1910-269Q, which is the end because the call out sheet said we only had to look at Papa. 1910-269 is done. Now we're looking at 1926.21. So now we're going into construction. All right, this is the government telling the government what to do. This is the government telling employers what to do, which is you got to train your people. Down here, the employer shall instruct each employee in the recognition and avoidance of unsafe conditions, and then blah, blah, blah. You have to train people on boom lifts, not just the ones they're going to operate, but also people that are operating around boom lifts. So boom lift safety is not just the operator, it's anybody that's going to be near the operator at all. You got to train them on how to avoid injuries. This is handling or using poisons, caustics, or other harmful substances. You got to train your people on how to handle that. And specifically with boom lifts, we're looking at any chemicals that are going to go into that vehicle or are already in that vehicle. How do they handle leaks, so on and so forth? What kind of PPE are they going to need? And then down here, harmful plants and animals. If you're going to expose people to harmful plants and animals, you got to train your people on how to deal with it, including run away. Now, I know that sounds silly, but the minute you put that boom up in the air, especially if it's the highest thing in the air, what you're going to run into is wasps, because insects tend to fly up high during their mating seasons, and especially if you're on a boom lift up in the middle in the air, you may be up there with a bunch of wasps. So it may sound funny or haha, we got to deal with the animals. But yeah, you get on a boom lift and you may enter yourself into the mating season of what male and female wasps. And I don't care what science says. If you don't know, wasps hate human beings and they want to wipe us off this planet. Wasps are evil and they want to kill you. You need to train your people on how to deal with the wildlife. 1926.21 done. Bring on 1926.453. 1926.453, also known as subpart L, is aerial lifts. And this whole section right here is saying that it must comply with ANSI, which we'll do ANSI later, including extensible boom platforms, aerial ladders, articulating boom platforms, vertical towers, and any combination of all the stuff that was said before, regardless of how it was made. This is talking about field modifications. Nobody's authorized to modify a boom lift. Do not modify the boom lift. And then specific requirements, ladder trucks and tower trucks, we're not talking about. 1926.453 Bravo 2, extensible and articulating boom platforms. This is us. Controls shall be tested each day prior to use. Only authorized person shall operate an aerial lift. And you cannot tie off to anything other than the boom lift itself. Your feet must stay on the bottom of the basket floor. Don't be using ladders or anything else, and don't be climbing the rails. Use the correct fall protection, but we'll get into this argument later on. You plus everything that's in that basket and everything that's being lifted cannot overload the lift. If you're using a machine that has outriggers, make sure that the brakes are set and that the outriggers land on either a pad or a solid surface. Wheel chocks need to be installed if you're going to use the device on an incline. We're not talking about lift trucks. It's got to have an upper control from the basket and then a ground control as well. Again, the same climbers thing. I don't know what they are. Just wear your normal stuff plus fall protection and talk to the competent person for your company. Don't modify the lift, including taking stuff off of it. And inspect everything before traveling. Electrical testing, nobody here is being trained for that. Bursting safety factor, nobody's building. Welding standard, welding standard, welding standard, welding standard, welding standard, and then the end of the page. 1926.453 is done. Bring on 1926.502. 1926.502, also known as subpart M, is fall protection. You should have had additional fall protection training. I'm going to cover a little bit later on when we look at issues, but you should have had other fall protection training prior to this. 502 is done, or pretty much skipped because you need to be having a whole separate class. That brings us completely closed with OSHA. Now let's get into ANSI. We are at 42 minutes. This is a great time for a break. I'm going to put a counter down here. When it gets to 0, we'll get back going. Now, ANSI we're going to do a little bit differently because two main reasons. One, ANSI is locked behind a paywall. This isn't like OSHA regulations where I can just throw them up. We can go through them one by one. ANSI has a bunch of regulations that I cannot just give to you because it could be seen as stealing in this format at least. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a very small overview, just kind of highlighting some of the differences. But this brings us to our next point, and that is what even really applies, because all of this doesn't apply to your boom lift that you're specifically using that we're training on right now. So let's take a look at each one of these and what they actually focus on. Alpha 92.2 is for vehicle-mounted elevating and rotating aerial devices. Okay, well, we're talking about a vehicle. Maybe this applies to us. Alpha 92.3 is manually propelled elevating aerial platforms. This isn't manually propelled. It's got a machine that actually drives it forward. So this probably doesn't apply to us. Alpha 92.5, boom-supported elevating work platforms. That could apply to us. Alpha 92.6, self-propelled elevating work platforms. That definitely applies to us, right? You know what? Let's ask Google. So if you Google search what ANSI regulation applies to boom lifts, it's only going to give you one, Alpha 92.2. So let's put all four of these all side by side, and if we take a look, if you'll open up the ANSI book and you'll actually flip about 3/4 of the way through it, you will find exactly what it's talking about. And if you flip 3/4 of the way through, you will see Alpha 92.3 is specifically talking about these non-mechanized boom lifts. They're talking about the ones that you can't drive from sitting in the platform. Alpha 92.3 is out. Again, 3/4 through, we find the image of a scissor lift, which Alpha 92.6 is talking about scissor lifts, which we are not talking about in this video. Alpha 92.2, the one that Google recommended Alpha 92.2, flip 3/4 through, and you're going to find a boom truck, which we're not talking about, so it's out. And this means Alpha 92.5 is the winner, and if we flip 3/4 through, bingo, this is the boom lift for this class. This is the right thing. There's one caveat back in Alpha 92.2, and that is where it's classifying all the lifts, almost like Alpha 92.2 is a controlling document, but it doesn't actually tell you how to use the lift or the rules of it. It's just classifying this as a MEWP Type 3 Group B, and that's it. The biggest reason that we had to go through all that is because every single one of these, 9.3, 9.5, 9.6, all of them, at the very beginning of them, they'll have this equipment not covered. And if you look right here, Alpha 92.2, so anything covered by Alpha 92.2 is not going to be in this book. Over here, Alpha 92.3, anything in Alpha 92.3 is not going to be in this book, and Alpha 92.6. So literally anything that's in these 3 other regulation books is not going to be in this book. This is what it's telling you. This is the only book you need for ANSI boom lifts, the ones we're talking about. This way, when some safety person or GC or superintendent, whatever, comes over, starts throwing out additional ANSI regulations, you need to flip to this part and say, no, we don't have to comply with that because this regulation says we don't have to. So let's take a walk through Alpha 92.5 very briefly. Again, we're not covering everything. 7.10.28 covers vacating an elevated platform. This is using it as a landing platform, raising it up, and then getting out of the platform to go do work somewhere up there. You're literally using it as a landing platform, as a vehicle to get to and from point A and point B, and that's okay. These are just some rules with it. 7.13.1 record retention, how long you have to hold records for, and what are all the things you need to be recording, including maintenance and so on and so forth. Proof of training, every operator has to have a card that has all of this stuff on the actual card. Pre-start inspection, before you actually start operating and driving around, you need to do this inspection. This is part of training. What all does the operator need to be trained on? Retraining, when do you retrain? Familiarization, this is, they've had boom lift training, but now they're hopping on a machine that they're not familiar with. Okay, let's give them familiarization training. That takes care of OSHA, that takes care of ANSI. Bring on the user manual. Alrighty then, we're talking about a JLG boom lift model 600 AJ operation and safety manual. And of course, the very first thing I always do is I flip usually close to the back, and I'll find the parts breakdown, so that way I can identify all the parts of this boom lift, so that way as I'm reading, I know what it's talking about. Operator training and knowledge, read, understand, and study this manual. Only properly trained personnel who have received unit-specific familiarization shall operate the MEWP, and MEWP is obviously Mobile Elevated Work Platform that ANSI talked about. Here's a good workplace inspection. Yep, here it is again. Workplace inspection. You've heard it over and over and over again. Check the workplace. Machine inspection. Do not carry materials directly on platform railings unless approved by JLG. Meaning, if you don't have a letter telling you can stack stuff on top, then don't. When driving, always position boom over the rear axle in line with the direction of travel. As you elevate up, and especially as you turn that turret, it's easy to forget which way is forward, which way is back. Always operate it in a specific manner, and never drive it while you're angled sideways. The boom lift only has specific tie-off points. This is not a tie-off point, this is not a tie-off point, nor is this or this or this or this or this. The only authorized tie-off points in this boom lift are right here. Enter and exit only through the gate, especially when you're using it as a landing platform. Ensure the platform assembly is fully lowered down. Face the platform when you're getting on and when you're getting off, and then basic ladder safety of 3 points of contact at all times. And depending on how much electricity is potentially running through that line, tells you how far away you need to stay away from it. Keep the chassis of the machine a minimum of 2 feet from holes, bumps, drop-offs, obstructions, debris, concealed holes, and other potential hazards at the ground level. Well, how do I know what's down there? Simple, you should have already done a work site inspection. Approved headgear must be worn by all operating and ground personnel. Keep all non-operating personnel at least 6 feet away from the machine during all operations. Operator training needs to include all of this, so take a look in the actual manual for the vehicle that you have, and if there's anything that you haven't been trained on, talk to the competent person for your company. The previous training was generic MEWP training. This is on this specific MEWP. Specifically for owners of the equipment or even renters of the equipment, this is the maintenance schedule for everything. Pre-start inspection includes cleanliness, structure, decals and play cards, or placards, whatever you want to pronounce it. Operations and safety manual, make sure it's there and make sure you've gone through it. Walk around inspection, battery. Now, talk to the competent person for your company to see what they want you to do, but for all of my companies, what I've told my people is, I do not want my electricians, plumbers, whatever, opening up batteries and checking liquid levels and all that. No. We'll have somebody else come in and do that. What I expect out of my basic operators is open the compartment up, look and see if there's anything wrong, and then let me know if there is. Otherwise, continue on with fuel, engine oil supply, hydraulic oil, accessories and attachments, function check, and then platform gate. Finally, lanyard attachment points. Obviously, make sure that they're still good and stable and all that. Warning, if the machine does not operate properly, turn off the machine immediately and report it to your supervisor or whoever does your maintenance. Now, this is the actual walk-around inspection. Platform assembly and gate, sky guard if it's installed on that model, platform control console, platform rotator, and it even has a picture in there for you, jib assembly and jib rotator if equipped, boom section uprights, turntable, all hydraulic cylinders, wheel and tire assemblies, drive motor, brake and hub, and tie rod ends and steering spindles. Counterweight, ground control console, hood assemblies, manual descent, swing motor and worm gear, turntable bearing, hydraulic pump and reservoir, battery. Again, do not open those batteries unless your competent tells you to. Air shutoff valve if it's equipped, and then finally the fuel tank. Function test, this is where you get in the machine and you start actually moving things around. First, from the ground, from that console, which we already saw the video, from that ground console, you're going to actually run all of these functions. Then you're going to get into the basket with fall protection on, hook up your Fall Pro, and then you're going to run it all the exact same things from the basket. And then obviously, if you're going to be transporting it, this is what you need to run through. And this is continuing on with the function check. Swing the boom over either of the rear tires, ensure that the drive orientation indicator illuminates, and then move down to placing the machine in transport mode. And do this. If the sky guard is installed, do the function check on that. And then it has the actual steps that it wants you to do. Now I'm going to sum this up in a big nutshell, and that is touch every single button and make sure every single function works. Every button from that control console, make sure everything goes the way that it's supposed to, make sure it sounds the way it's supposed to, and make sure that it's functioning the way it's supposed to. Now, most of us in construction, we hop back and forth from machine to machine, so it's hard to remember exactly what each light does. If a light pops onto the machine, stop what you're doing, check this manual, and figure out what's going on, what's wrong. And I cannot tell you how many times I've asked an operator, what does that button right there do? What does that one do? And the operator look at me and go, I don't know. Well, guess what? There's a book that literally came with this machine. There's literally a manual that'll tell you what every button does, and you're looking at it right here. Position of least forward stability. Boys and girls around the world, listen to me here. When you are boomed like this, sideways, you are the least stable, and the manual will tell you it. Look for any other things that'll affect your safety triangle. We'll get into that later on. And that is the end of our safety manual journey. Let's look at some real stuff. When we boom all the way up, as high as this guy is, it is really hard to see down there on the ground. This is one of the reasons why a proper work site area inspection is so critically important. We're going to look at a couple of pictures, and a good work site inspection could have prevented almost all of these. And I'll explain the word almost in a minute. First, why would you ever drive on top of grading? That is meant for people to walk on, not for you to drive over. There is no way that grading was going to hold you, and that's why they ended up tipping the lift over. During a good walk-around inspection, you're going to identify points that you need to be careful that you don't drive near. This is the kind of thing, put up cones, put up danger tape, put up something that way you, even whenever you're 200 feet in the air, you can still look down and go, okay, I'm too far, I'm too close to that, I need to get away from it. Soft embankments. While he was low to the ground, while he was boomed in, right? While he was low to the ground, this soft embankment wasn't an issue. It wasn't until he boomed out that all of that force came pushing down on that sand, that dirt, whatever it is, and that's why it ended up tipping over. Either A, he drove over there while he was elevated out, or B, most likely, he was sitting there just fine until he elevated out and then boom, that's when it sank down. Tell Bobby to go move his truck out of the way. Don't just try to do this weird driving thing. Move the dude's truck and then you can elevate over. You see the back tires over here lifting up? Either A, they're driving while they're elevated, which is not a good idea, or B, they're trying to boom around in a weird manner because they don't want to have to tell this person to come move their truck. If you look at the majority of boom lift incidents, you will see that turret rotated completely 90 degrees. Most of the time when we have a tip over, the turret is rotated 90 degrees. The people will drive up to their position where they want to be, and then they'll rotate that turret and start booming out, and then boom, they hit the ground. When you rotate that turret 90 degrees, you are making it the absolute most likely to tip over. Pay attention and plan your job out, and you won't have this situation. And also, operating on an incline is probably a bad idea too. Now, y'all remember I said there was a most likely it'll prevent them all? This is a weird one, and that is substructure. I don't know if I would have caught this. This is a weakened substructure, and there's cars right there. So theoretically, the boom operator in their mind are thinking, well, big trucks got to pull over here. You got a truck right here in the background. Big trucks drive over this all the time. I should be able to also. If there's substructure, you need to pay attention to what you're doing. I probably would have been caught by this too, just to be dead honest. I'm not perfect, but substructure, you need to pay attention to what you're doing. This is a boom lift fall, and there's a reason that there's police tape wrapped around. I don't like showing these pictures, but I need y'all to understand how critically important it is to do a site inspection. From this picture, it can't really tell what happened, but when I show you this, this is all about check the area. If there's somewhere you definitely don't want to drive over, throw a cone over it. That way you can see it from 100 feet up in the air. Oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? Where's your head protection? Where's your fall protection on? Yes, when you're traveling with it, you need to have your fall protection on because boom lifts are a catapult. Here's how this works, boys and girls. When you are driving like this, the first tires that come down, it's going to push you down. The second tires, when they come down, they're going to launch you into the air. So how do we fix this? I'll show you after this video. The solution is simple. Do not have a 2-foot drop and expect your catapult not to catapult you. Very simple. So you throw some wood underneath there. You throw a big giant metal sheet as long as it's going to hold that. But wood is really good. We throw wood under there all the time to soften that drop down. It's got to be a lot of wood. Don't get me wrong. Don't just throw some 2x4 and don't build like some weird bridge like this. It needs to be a bunch of wood laid out like this where your boom lift can roll down. You're literally making a ramp. Luckily on construction jobs, we tend to have a lot of extra wood, so that's why we typically just throw a bunch of wood down there, make yourself a ramp to come down off. But that brings us to fall protection. What is missing in this picture? Dude's got his harness on, but what is he tied off to? Fall protection, fall protection, fall protection. But I got a question for you. If something does happen, I have one question for you, and it's how much do you want to hurt? Now, as the video continues on, both the men are moving around. They're okay. They're alive. But we can all agree those boys took a really hard hit right there. That was rough. And that's what it's like if you're going to have your basket tip over like that. You're going to have all the centrifugal motion of your machine swinging you out and maybe coming back and hitting the boom, maybe swinging back up and hitting the basket. That is why Safety Tavern strongly, strongly recommends never have a lanyard or an unpacking lanyard in a boom lift. Only have a yo-yo or a fall restraint device, but that's like a 3-foot rope to where you can't even get out of the basket, let alone be slung out of the basket. Most of my companies, it is a hardcore yo-yo only policy in a boom lift, and this is why. The next issue is chaos, the pure chaos of every construction site. It just has a natural intent. The plumbers are doing their thing, the electricians are doing, everybody's doing their own thing, and it can get very chaotic. If it is too chaotic for you to operate that boom lift, you need to stop and move the boom lift to a safer area. Maybe come in and do that work later on. Maybe come do it whenever, maybe do it on the weekend. Maybe do it when nobody's here. Do not let your people, as well as you as a boom lift operator, do not go up 100 foot in the air and everything around you is just chaos. Someone's going to eventually hit your lift. I don't know if I told y'all, but fall protection is mandatory in a scissor lift. Mandatory. Not a request, mandatory. If you need to gain height in a boom lift, like you've elevated up, but you still need to, because piping's in the way or something's in the way, you still need to gain another foot, maybe 2 feet, 3 feet, whatever. Talk to the manufacturer of that lift and see what they say about this little bump step kind of thing. GENIE has their own, JLG has their own. Just give them a call. Tell them you need to gain another 2 or 3 feet worth of height on top of the basket, and they'll understand. Inspect your boom lift before operating it. Inspect your boom lift. Stay away from power lines. Stay away from any ignition sources. This young man got extremely lucky. If it is rated for 2 people, then do not have 3 people on the lift. Very simple. The very last thing we're going to talk about is landing platform. This is where you take a boom lift and you elevate up to an area, and then you're going to come out of the basket through the doorway to land on an upper area to do work or whatever. Before you use it as a landing platform, Safety Tavern is going to tell you, you need to put together a written plan and have the competent person for your job site, not just for your company, but for your job site, sign off on it. It needs to include, everybody's got lift training, everybody's got fall protection training, everybody knows the plan, where we're going to park, where we're going to land, and what we're going to use to stay tied off and protected from falls 100% of the time. This needs to be a written plan. If you're using it to ferry people, meaning we're going to land people up there and come back down and get more, now you got to take into account emergencies. How are you going to get everybody down if there's an emergency? That's all we got for Boom Lift, folks. Talk to the competent person for your job site, for your company, to see how they want you to handle everything. Again, nothing we said means anything. It's all up to your company. And God bless you, and go out there and get some work done safely and get home to your families.